Welcome, Buff fans, to another episode of the Primetime Night Owls, but we're doing this during the day. And
Yeah.
Matt, we didn't get a chance to, talk right after the Coach Prime extension last week, so we're going to go over that quite a bit. Um, you know, I think that's the big thing that everybody wanted out of this offseason, if you're a Buff fan, but we're going to talk about that, but also a few more takeaways from some of the assistant coaches that we talked about in our last video, and just some other, newsy type items around the Buffs as they resume spring ball this week. They'll get going on Tuesday, and they've been off last week obviously because of spring break, so we're going to get into all that. But let's start with the contract because like I said, that's what Buff fans been waiting all off season for was a new contract for Coach Prime. And what was your reaction when you saw the news about the extension?
First of all, glad to see that they got it done because behind the scenes, we knew that they had been, in negotiations and, we'd heard a couple of different things about what potential hangups here or there might be. And it sounds like they were able to resolve a lot of those. And first of all, just extremely well deserved. Every last dollar of it, is probably still to a degree underpaid by the value that he actually represents and brings the program. But that being said, I don't think it was ever all about the money for him, but it's about what the money represents. It's about his cachet as a coach and the recognition of what he's accomplished and what he's been able to do. It's something that we talked about last week, how in 2+ years, he has become one of, if not the most influential voice in college football. And I think he
Yeah.
might be the most influential voice in college football. And it was earned because at first nobody really wanted to hear what he had to say or what they were going to do. But he went out and he earned it by the process that they underwent to completely rehabilitate a program. And they did it overnight, essentially. It may not have translated to immediate tangible success, but we all knew what the process was going to take. And, this is a guy who so many people have speculated wouldn't really be interested in staying here long term. And certainly I had my questions about if this was his long-term plan as well, but it wasn't because I thought he was being disingenuous with us. I just thought that once his sons left, then he would reevaluate and maybe move on to a different chapter. But what has become evidently clear over the last couple of years is one thing: he actually really likes Colorado, which
Yeah.
everybody who hasn't really experienced Colorado, there's not much to dislike here unless you're Stephen A and you want to, have this nightlife and look, there are some drawbacks, right? Like it's not a naturally very diverse place. And that certainly coming from different places can be a major culture shock. But he has done wonderful things over the last 2 years to help even boost that around here, right? And
Yeah.
so it's not just the economic impact, it's the social, the societal impact that he's brought to not only just the town, which has really in a lot of ways re-energized this place. I mean, we just landed the Sundance Film Festival, and you can't tell me that the buzz that he's helped create around here with the brand new hotels up on the hill and all of the development that's gone on around up there, that he didn't have a part to play in that. And that's going to be a huge, event every year now in this town that's going to also bring a ridiculous economic impact. So what he's done, it's hard to just measure it on the field,
Yeah.
which is why he deserves to be one of the highest paid college coaches. And whether or not this really affects, is he going to, does this mean he's going to see out the entire extension? I don't know. I really don't know. But what I do know is it now calms down some of the noise.
Yeah.
We're not going to, I did see a couple guys today who really aren't very good on national networks kind of drumming up that I don't even want to bring up who it was, but drumming up that whole thing. And it's like everybody under the comments was like, he just signed an extension. Stop. Like, just what are you talking about? And the truth is, if there was ever an NFL, door, it would be to Coach Shador. But I think at this point, I really believe that door has been closed because, look, unless it goes disastrously wherever Shador gets drafted and the coach gets fired after year one, which is always a possibility, but that would really be the only realistic circumstance that I could see him ever possibly going, you know what? Okay. That would be the only thing. But even then, Brian, I think that at this point we can put that to bed now. And congratulations to not only Deion Sanders and his team, but to Rick George,
Yeah.
because Rick George was the one who really orchestrated everything, along with some other people behind the scenes, to get him here. But now that he's been here, Rick George has had to keep up, right? They brought him here without the money to pay for him, and they had to find it. Well, they found it. Now they got to find more of it. And then they found money to get a new scoreboard and this and that. And here comes the artificial turf. And there he has done a wonderful job keeping up with the times. Oh, by the way, all the while having to keep up with the new structures of college athletics. So not only has he had to renovate and completely retool how Colorado's athletic department works, he's then had to do it again because the House settlement came in and said, no, 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 we're actually not going to do the NIL and the collective. We're going to revenue sharing. So he's had to, he's juggling a million balls in the air, and he's done a wonderful job. So that's a long way of saying congratulations to all involved, because this was not an overnight thing, even though maybe a couple years you remove yourself and you go, wow, that happened pretty quickly. It took a lot of painstaking work from a lot of people, and it has been a tremendous success.
Yeah. Well, I agree with pretty much everything you said, other than I don't at all close the door on him going to the NFL at some point. I think that if anything, this I wouldn't say opens the door more, but I think that's always going to be a thing to where if wherever Shador goes, if that head coach gets fired, the first name to come up will be Deion Sanders. And the fact of the matter is that the buyout is not massive. And I mean, if a team, let's say the Titans draft him, right, and it doesn't go well, and they fire the coach at the end of this year, the Titans need 10 million bucks to buy out Coach Prime. That's not a whole lot. So I that's the only thing I disagree with you on, is that I don't think this closes that door at all. I think it's always going to be a thing as long as he's in coaching and as long as Shador's playing in the NFL. I think it's always going to be a thing that when the job comes open, if the job comes open where Shador is, I think that's going to be a thing. Now, if a job, what I think we're done with is hearing Coach Prime's name for any opening, because I think he's been very adamant that I'm not going to coach unless it's my son's, right? And so, I think that if he goes to say the Titans and the Saints fire the coach at the end of the year, well, no, I don't think anybody would realistically look at him as a Saints candidate. So, but the bottom line is, I mean, I agree with everything else that you said. Is that this is a nice reward for Coach Prime for everything he's done for the city of Boulder, for the University of Colorado, and did a video with Adam last week, and I referenced that I saw a USC writer, his initial reaction was, "Boy, that's a lot of money for a coach who's 13-10." Well, yes, if you just looked at that right there, yes, it's a lot of money for a coach that's 13-12. Yes. Now,
If you only paid attention to those 2 years
that's
of
what I'm
Colorado
saying.
football and
That's what I'm
nothing
saying.
else, yeah, yeah,
That's what I'm
yeah,
saying is,
yeah,
yes, if you look at 13-12, that's a lot of money for a 13-12 coach.
yeah,
However, when you look at what Colorado was before that 13-12, okay, now it's a little more worth it. Then when you look at what he's done with the whole totality of the program, now it's totally worth it. And
yeah.
um, so yes, and I assume this guy understands that, but it's just funny that people are always going to point at something, and yes, he for that kind of money, you probably want him to win more than what he's done, but um, I think we're still heading into year three, right? I mean, it's still very early in this process, and I don't think anybody that's followed this Colorado program, and I don't think any fans are upset at all with 13-12 at this point. I mean, literally 2 years ago, well, two and a half, I guess now, they're 1-11 and the worst team in the country. And he goes 4-8 with a bunch of close losses, and then 9-4. And it was in the conversation for the. I mean, they were competing for that Big 12 title up until the final minutes of the last game of the Big 12 regular season, and had Houston been a little less Houstony, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
in those final few minutes against BYU,
It
then
would
maybe
all look
CU,
different.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, of course, yeah, I know you go back and it had CU just beat Kansas and things like that, but the bottom line is that they were, one win in some way from somebody of
Yep.
being in that Big 12 title game, and so yeah, everything that he's done at the University of Colorado, he absolutely deserves it. And I agree with you that in some ways you could even argue he's underpaid, but man, 10 million bucks, that's pretty good.
No, it's pretty good. Yeah. I guess you're probably right. If that situation occurs, he'll definitely be brought up because obviously it draws ratings and numbers. And look, you want to find a coach that can make a quarterback work, and we certainly know that he and Shador have a pretty good relationship. However, I'm still in the camp that I think Shador is going to work out in the NFL. And when the quarterback works,
Oh,
the
I agree
coach
with you.
typically
Yeah.
looks pretty good. Now,
Yeah.
depending upon where he goes, I think Stefanski's, I actually think he's a pretty damn good coach in Cleveland. So
Yeah.
I don't think they've got too much to worry about. Plus, the Haslams are, although I will say, and we maybe talk about this for a second, the Haslams are a mess. The owners of the Browns, they just came out today and admitted they made a giant swing and a miss on Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
Brian, he's under contract for what, at least 3 more years?
Right.
I mean, they're going to have to deal with that still, unless they just essentially have already come to the recognition. He goes, yeah, we tried to find a quarterback, but we didn't. And it's like,
Yeah.
ooh, I don't know that I would have said that one out loud. I mean, they screwed over the whole league by giving the guy 250 million guaranteed. All the other owners were furious because they set a precedent that nobody else was going to follow. And everybody said, well, great. Now we got to deal with agents. And then no one else gave anywhere close to that kind of money guaranteed. You'll pay attention, right?
Yeah.
Like that was Russell Wilson wanted all that money and he got a lot of it and unfortunately too much of it. But that was the one contract like hot off the heels of Deshaun Watson. And so it's interesting, So look, kind of transitioning back, it is a situation for Colorado where if you want to compete, this is probably the only way to do that right now,
Right.
if I'm being quite honest with you. So,
Hmm.
you brought up, well, that kind of money, you hope you win a little more. I mean, there is quite literally nothing more they could have possibly done except for maybe, you don't get beat deep late against Kansas State, but that type of
Right.
shit happens every year to every
Hmm.
team and every game, right? So I just think that it's a pretty cool thing because it's not only the impact that he's having for himself independently and for Colorado, it's the impact on everyone else. Look at Eddie George, look at Michael Vick, look at Deshaun Jackson. He's opening the door for other players and black coaches to get these opportunities. And I know that if you were to ask him, that means just as much to him as probably most of what he's doing here, right?
Yeah.
Having that type
Hmm.
of an impact. So it's not just the influence that he has with the ideas he has, like the spring game, et cetera, and the different ways he's marketed everybody, the well off, and we can go down the list of the accomplishments and the things that they do differently. But it's also the impact that he's having culturally on the sport. It's huge. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a welcome sign of relief, and we can kind of put that to bed.
Yeah.
I'm not really all that worried about it now. And excuse me, I will say the thing I've said the whole time. Colorado fans just appreciate it while you have it, even with a contract extension because it will one day, as all things do, inevitably come to an end. And who knows what it'll look like after that. And one thing I do know is wherever he leaves it, it'll be in an infinitely better place than where he found it. I mean, they
Yeah.
won't even be in the same realm of conversation. So, all credit to him. And I'm looking forward to seeing what he's going to continue doing here because the trajectory is straight up. I heard the DNVR boys talking about how from all their sources that Colorado's NIL resources are starting to improve as well, which I imagine as those boys mentioned was a big part of the contract. So look, he's making sure he's got all of his bases covered if he's going to commit long term because if I'm going to be here long term, I'm going to make sure we're going to do this right. And that's the only way he does things, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's not a half-ass kind of guy. He's
Yeah.
a I'm gonna give it my all type of guy.
Yeah. And just clarify, it's not in the contract, but I'm sure it's an assurance that he got, that, hey, that we need this to happen. But,
Yes.
and I want to go back and say, when I say yes, for that kind of money, you want to win more. I'm not at all complaining about him making this money. I'm just saying when you put him up against the highest paid coaches he is now one of the highest paid coaches in college football. Those other guys certainly have won a little bit more than he has, but I would also argue none of those guys has made the impact that Coach Prime has made on their university and probably in college football in general. And so I think there's different ways to say you're worth that money. And the bottom line is Coach Prime makes all that impact, and he's starting to win. So
Yeah.
and I think that if he's here long term and as we know with these contracts, just because you sign a 5 year deal doesn't mean you'll be here. Mel Tucker signed a 5 year deal and was gone in 15 months. So
Well,
um, you never know what's going to happen. But I mean, if he's here a long time, I fully expect that he's going to win big and be competing with those other guys. And we're talking those other guys are like Kirby Smart at Georgia and Steve Sarkisian at Texas and Dan Lanning at Oregon just signed a new big
how many
contract.
of
And
those
so
guys were born on third base, though? I think that's
exactly.
something
That's what I
that's
mean.
important.
That's what I
Yeah.
mean is that,
Yeah.
you know, the impact that he's made on his university is bigger than
Oh,
what those others have
infinitely.
made.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, uh, look, Dan Lanning might be a great coach, but I mean, when you're handed, an already um, moving machine, how
Yeah.
hard is it to keep it going? And not to downplay what he's doing, but I think I'm just saying that what Coach Prime has done has been infinitely more difficult to get where he is than what those others have had to do to get to where they are.
He got it out the mud, Brian.
Yeah. And so when you do that, you're worth it,
Yep.
and look, I threw all those numbers in my story and see you had it in their press release. The impact is so far beyond football even. And I mean, the highest GPA the football program's ever had, and the economic impact that he's had, and the fact that I think it's 60% more applications to the university, and it's like significantly higher number of African American applications at the university.
Yeah.
I mean, he's made such an impact that he's absolutely worth it. And the exciting thing for Buff fans is that the winning has come along with it. And so you knew you were getting a lot of notoriety with Coach Prime, but now you're getting the notoriety and you're getting the winning. And so I think that makes this year a big year, and we're going to talk more about it as we go along. But I don't know if it adds any pressure to go win this year, but I think that they're set up to win, and I think that's what's exciting for Buff fans.
Yeah. I mean, look, it'll be a talking point for people who are looking to, you know, disparage him with their agenda if they
Yeah,
don't do well. I think we all understand that. But heavy is the head, and I mean that's his whole life, right?
yeah,
I mean, ever since graduated high school, that's basically been his life. Heavy is the head, and the one thing that sometimes you worry about, at least in my opinion, are coaches getting complacent. That's the last thing that
right,
Deion Sanders would ever get is
right,
complacent because there is pressure on him. So certainly from outside expectations, but none more so than he puts on himself because the man wants to win. And
yeah,
that's what this has always been about. Now, without his son, well, I would say it's been about that and getting his sons to a position where they can succeed, which he admitted as much to us, what, 2 weeks ago or a week ago when we talked to him. He goes, "We've already won. We've already won.
yeah,
They're gonna, Shooter's gonna be a first round pick. Shiloh's gonna do his thing. They have already won,
yeah,
and so now it's really, strictly, I would imagine, about the winning and obviously the raising of young men and the being there and the tutelage of young people. So, yeah, look, if he wants his face on the flat irons, as he said many times, if he wants to ride off into the sunset, which, now that he signed the contract, a lot of the content creators are circulating a lot of his old clips around. And the one thing that I've always been consistent in saying is he's always been very upfront with his intentions and what he's thinking about if he has formed an opinion on them, right?
yeah,
And so what reason do you have not to take him at his word until he breaks it? And up until this point, he's been nothing but forthright for the most part. Maybe he skirted a question or omitted some information because it was an ongoing negotiation, but I wouldn't say that he's ever been deceitful or duplicitous or, you know, um, non forthcoming. He's always been very frank and very upfront about what his intentions are. So I will take him for his word that he
yeah,
wants to finish his coaching career at Colorado.
yeah. And honestly, just if you look at just his coaching path, um, it's pretty remarkable. I mean, this was a guy that I don't know how. I mean, it must have been 12, 15 years ago he started coaching his sons. I think Shador was maybe 7 or 8, and so that would have been about 14, 15 years ago, where he starts coaching them in youth football, and now here he is making $10.8 million a year as a coach in major college football. look, you got to give the man props. I mean, he turned himself into a pretty darn good football coach. Um, Not that we didn't think he could be. I mean, when he started this journey, that's why he did it, because he knows football, right? But there's not a lot of people that can go from, I'm just going to coach my sons in youth ball, and then 15 years later, you're making $10.8 million a year as a major college football coach. So kudos to him, because he's come a long way as a coach. And um, I wonder, it's something I would love to ask him, is like, I wonder what this feeling is like for him compared to the growth he made as a player. Because as a player, you reach each level, and you get better and better, and you challenge yourself a little bit more. And I wonder what this journey has felt like for him compared to when he was a player. It's obviously very different. It's a different type of path when you're not competing yourself, but it's really kind of a remarkable thing. So kudos to him.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you want to look at it from just the coaching resume alone, it's pretty
Yeah.
remarkable because he's done it his own way. He talks about how he doesn't want to inherit a legacy, he wants to create one. Well, that's what he's doing. That's what he is in the process of doing. And that is work that isn't for the faint of heart. You take a lot of barbs, a lot of bows and arrows. Very few people could embark on the journey that he did and even come up close to the amount of success that he has. Now, look, he hit the jackpot when he landed Travis. Okay, that had a big part to do with his ascension. Let's just say that. And his son that he developed as a quarterback and had others help develop was one of the best in the country. Now,
Yeah.
this is where the other side of it, you're going to hear the national pundits use this argument that I just said. All right, well, he had Travis and he had Shador. Now, what do you do on your own? And now is a big part of carving out just another, element of his legacy and of his prowess, which I imagine he can't wait to get underway with. And the one other part about this I'll say is you talked about the growth. Um, a lot of people in his position with his stature and status would not admit to weaknesses or ever having been less than. And at first, he didn't want to do it. At first, he didn't want to talk about how much he had to grow and this and that because he knew that it would be used against him by some people. I think that was his major deterrent. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe he needed to lose and have their asses kicked a couple of times in 2023 to get to that point. But you can't get to the end of a season where you only win 4 games and necessarily feel great about everything, even though
Yeah.
it has been an unbelievable turnaround. As an elite competitor, I'm just talking about what I read from him in 2023. There was, I wouldn't call it a humbling, I would call it a recognition of the work that lied ahead for him and a fine tuning of their process because it was a different level, a different speed, et cetera, et cetera. But ever since, and he's admitted as such, which is great because it shows and demonstrates great self-awareness, which obviously he has in spades, that he has developed and he's learned. And there's a lot of guys that don't like to talk about that. But
Yeah.
this has been a new process, and since he's been so transparent and an open book, that's the other part of it too. He's showing everybody inside the walls. Every other college football coach would be pissing down their leg to give the
Yeah.
public and their competitors and their peers that type of access behind the scenes. He's like, no, look,
Yeah.
because I know if I don't show it to you, you're going to say it's there, but look, it's not there.
Yeah.
Look, it behind the curtain, it isn't there. And so it's been revolutionary, quite frankly, for his for the coaching profession, and for anybody else really at the power level. I know
Yeah.
he comes from that Hall of Fame pedigree, but look at how he's turned over the coaching staff and the roster. He's gone through over 150 plus players at this stage, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
with the players in and out of the program, the coaching staff he's remade over 3 times now. So, hey, man, you know, I remember somebody once told me, if you don't have haters, you ain't popping,
Yeah.
right? And he's got a lot of haters, so he must be popping.
Yeah. Well, yes, and I'll say too, and I know you didn't mean it this way, but like as far as like Travis, it's not like Travis fell in his lap. Yes,
No,
he
he
was
landed
fortunate.
that.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
fortunate that he got Travis Hunter, but you look, he got him because of who he is, because of Coach Prime, who he is, and you know because Travis knew he could go there and develop and be the player he was. And so,
Clearly.
it's why Coach Prime is getting a DJ McKinney, a Jordan Seaton, on and on. The guys that he's getting, a Julian Lewis, right? And Julian still has to prove at the college level, I know, but like, he's getting these guys because of who he is. And look, a lot of props. And I mentioned a 15-year journey. I mean, geez, even go back to 5 years, just when his college football journey started
Yeah.
at Jackson State. The ascension he's made in 5 years to go from, an HBCU, to being one of the highest paid coaches in the FBS. I'm not sure anybody's ever done that. I mean, you look
No
at,
one has.
yeah, and I mean the guys that, like Dan Lanning hasn't been a head coach very long, but he's been at the Power Five level, and he took that path that, I guess, is a more traditional path. Coach Prime didn't take the traditional path, and look where it's got him. And yeah, so just kudos to him. He's done a great job in his career. I'm excited to see what year three brings for the Colorado Buffaloes, because um, I know Buff fans are now excited. He's locked in for this year, and he's set up for a pretty nice future here at the University of Colorado.
I am looking forward to seeing what it looks like in a couple of years.
Yeah,
Because if they do have all these resources now, if they are making all these changes, then there is no reason that there should be a major drop off within the next couple of years. And I don't expect one for this season, a major drop off, but
yeah.
it will just be a changing of the guard. So we'll obviously talk about a lot more of that as we go on. But yeah, I mean, look, I was shocked he signed on for a few more years of having to talk to us.
Yeah, that's probably the bigger deal, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
he probably couldn't
He
wait to
probably
get
worked
out.
that in the contract.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's got to be something in there. Media
Gonna be a
obligations.
security guard at the door before the
Yeah.
next presser.
Media obligations, but not these particular people.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, congratulations to him.
Yeah.
Let's lead into the next topic, with this, because there's some other like newsy type things that happened this last week, but I know that you wanted to talk some more nuggets on the not Denver Nuggets, but Nuggets on some of the new assistants. So since we're talking coaching, let's get to that first, and
Okay.
just kind of talk about some of the things that you wanted to go over. We didn't really get to them last week. Um, I had to cut things off because I had to get to one of my son's baseball games, I think. So, yeah, go ahead and talk about some of the things you want to talk about with the assistants that we didn't get to last week.
Yeah, just some of my takeaways from talking to the coaching staff. We spoke to Robert Livingston, Pat Shermer, Domata Pecco, George Hilo. We talked to Warren Sapp, Marshall Falk. Am I missing anybody? Gerard,
Yeah,
Hegeman, Gunnar White. I mean, that's a lot of coaches
Michael
and a lot of
Pollock.
Michael Pollock, a lot of
Yeah,
new faces. And so that was just off the top of my head. But
yeah,
specific takeaways, let's just go through them real quick. I think there's some interesting stuff. With Robert Livingston, obviously, what a huge coup to get him to stick around. But we told you and we may have mentioned it last week, but we told you on this podcast months ago that this is where he wants to be. It would have
yeah,
had to be his dream job for him to leave and move his family again. He's
yeah.
got 3 kids that are under 10 at home. They just got a house. They absolutely love Colorado. I do believe one day he will leave, but it won't be for another college. It'll be for an NFL job. I really don't even think that as a head coach that would maybe, but I would think
What?
it would be safe to assume that NF back to the NFL
Yeah,
ranks is where he'd want to go.
yeah. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to make a point too that, like,
Yeah.
he's different too, in that a lot of these assistant coaches are used to moving every year,
Right.
and I know that's hard, but they're used to it. Whereas he wasn't. I mean, he was in Cincinnati for 12 years, and so, I could see with him that being a situation where you move to Boulder. It's like, yeah, I don't want to move in a year.
Mm-mm.
It's, we were in one place for 12 years. Let's stay here as long as we can.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that there's something to that. Like, if you're used to that lifestyle, it's a little bit easier to maybe pick up and move after a year when another job offer comes. Um, that's just my take. I know I mean, it can work the opposite way too. Like, I know, our buddy Mike Stanford, he was that way. I mean, he moved all over the place, and his kids were at a lot of different schools. And when things went south here, and he was part of that Carl Durrell staff that got let go, um, he hasn't moved because they were tired of moving. So it can go the other way too. But I think that I think it's a factor that Robert Livingston's family was not used to picking up and moving every year, and they want to lay some roots here. So go ahead.
Also, you're in Boulder. It's
Right.
just awesome. Like, do
Yeah.
we really have to leave right away? I mean,
Right.
maybe okay if it's your
Like we,
dream
we just
job, but
got
you
here.
got a really
Yeah.
sweet gig here, and they're
Hmm.
going to give you more money. I mean, really?
Yeah.
Anyway, so he's just getting his hands around everything for this year's defense. That was one thing that he made clear, right? Like he has expectations for some of these guys based upon who they were maybe at previous stops or what they look like on paper. But it's clear that for 2025, he still needs. What did he say? He always says, "I can see better than I can hear," or "I can see better than I can hear." Is that what he says? What's the
I don't
line?
remember what he says.
Yeah, it's that's the line. That's the line. I
Yeah.
can see better than how I can hear because I want to see it on the practice field. Basically, that's his point.
Yeah.
Let's see. He mentioned a couple of times that having the hard conversations, which I think was interesting because I think there were some hard conversations that he had to have with some returners who may be expected to either have a bigger role or to be a focal point, or maybe they were gonna have to move positions because now their position room is too crowded. I think there was some of that where Colorado just overall has felt like maybe they've brought in some upgrades over some of the guys that they have already had.
Yeah.
Did you catch that?
Yeah, for sure. And look, the bottom line I got from Robert Livingston is just it's going to be different, and he's going to adapt to it, and that there's different ways of adapting, and he comes from the NFL, and so he's used to a lot of roster turnover every year, and so
Yeah.
and he's used to uh, April, May. You're bringing in new guys that are brand new to the program, and you got to get them ready by August and September. So I think there's still going to be some more of that stuff, but yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from him is just that I think he's going to prove to be, he did last year, but I think he's going to continue to prove to be someone that just adapts really well to situations and to whatever he has to work with.
He talked about they've got to find new leaders, right? Because
Yeah.
you lost Shiloh, you lost Cam, you lost Vontae, you lost Shane Cokes, you lost your leadership tent poles at all three levels of the field. So now other guys are going to have to step into those roles. It'll be interesting to see who fills those. I think fans,
Yeah.
have ideas of who they think might be able to fill those or what they're seeing on well off, but we won't know up until, the fall, really, fall camp, who really starts to assert themselves as a leader. I think DJ McKinney falls in that category. I would think Hood. I would think Hodge, defensive line wise, Amari McNeil, you'd hope to, have that type of a guy take another step up. The way he was carrying Julian Lewis like a toddler at one of those practices the other day, I think maybe he has taken one of those leadership roles. Arden
Yeah.
Walker is another guy. He also talked about thank you, Diego Pavia, for allowing us to get Preston Hodge back because he called Preston Hodge the guy that stirs the drink for how they play. Let's just make sure we don't underrate how big of a deal it was that Preston Hodge is back in a Buffs uniform in 2025.
Yeah, I think that was a big deal, because I think it's totally different if you lose Travis Hunter and Preston Hodge. Now, I think Preston is still recovering from that injury, whatever it was at the end of last season. But when you get him back in the fall, and you put him back in that spot that he was in that slot corner, and you put DJ in his spot, and now you got Colton Hood there. Now it's like, okay, you got
Yeah.
something here. And so, yeah, I think that was a big one. And yeah, it's amazing to me the rules that do change in the NCAA, but the Buffs are really benefiting from that one. And this could be a whole other topic. But Preston Hodge is one of several now players that they're getting because of that new rule. I mean, there's a lot of key players that the Buffs are getting because of that new rule. I mean, Martavius French is a
Right.
guy, and I think Reginald Hughes is in that category as well. Zarian McGill on the offensive line. These are all guys that thought their careers were over in December, that this rule comes out, and all of a sudden the Buffs are like, cool, let's go grab this guy for another year. So yeah, this is Robert Livingston's going to benefit by Diego Pavia more
Oh,
so
big
than
time.
more so than just Preston Hodge.
Didn't he say drinks on me when I see you next
Yeah,
time or something like
he,
that?
he, he goes when I think he said when I'm in the Ville, meaning
Yeah, that's
Nashville,
that's right.
drinks are on me.
Yeah, he's a good dude. I really like Coach Livingston a lot. He talked about Tawfiq Bayard. I think Tawfiq Bayard's a guy that they're going to look at for a starting position right
Yeah,
out of the chute. Coming
right.
from USF, having the NFL lineage, right? Is he Kevin Bayard's brother?
Yeah,
Is
he
that who
is.
he is?
Yep.
Okay, okay. Because I hadn't put two and two together until he said it the other day. I was like,
Yeah, I didn't
of
either. And then I
course,
was like, wait, who's his
yeah,
brother? And I had to go look it
yeah.
up. But
Played, Kevin Byard, great safety in the NFL. Moved around
yeah,
a little bit, Titans, Bears a little bit. Let's see, Kevin Mathis. He talked glowingly about Kevin Mathis, and Kevin Mathis, for some fans who don't know, is Colorado's cornerbacks coach, and or is it technically DB's coach? I don't know what his official
corners.
title is.
Yeah,
It's just
corner
corners.
goes. Yeah.
So he was also interviewed by the Saints when Robert Livingston was for the defensive coordinator position. Kevin
Yeah.
Mathis was also interviewed by the Saints, which I thought was, or at least had interest. Was he interviewed or had interest?
Well, Coach Prime said that the Saints wanted Kevin Mathis as well. So
Okay, so maybe I don't know if he was interviewed, but they had interest in him.
yeah,
Maybe I'll correct myself there. Either way, he called him one of the best teachers he's ever been around, which I thought
yeah.
was really high praise. That speaks a lot because, quite frankly, Brian, and we'll just be honest, they don't give us Coach Mathis. Have we spoken to him ever?
We
Once?
have when this staff first got hired and he was on that staff, there was a couple days where they did. I don't know if it was one week and one the next week, but it was all the offensive assistants one day and then all the defensive assistants one day, and we got them then. And there may have been one other time. There's been several times that on our schedule that we get for media relations, like here's what the week looks like. That Kevin Mathis is on that list, and then it turns out to be somebody else. And I think it's just because he doesn't really want to do it, and that's
Yeah, I
fine.
don't know. I don't know
I
the
don't know
reason.
why it is, but yeah, it's been a long time since we talked to him. It may have been, I don't know if it was just that first day back in, I think it was February of 23. Might have been the
I don't
last
remember
time. I
ever
don't
speaking to
remember,
him.
but yeah, it's been a long time.
Anyway, my point was is that we don't really know who he is beyond what we've heard, and all
Yeah,
we hear are people praising him. So clearly they feel really good about their defensive coaching staff right now
yeah,
with that three-headed monster at defensive line. And maybe we'll just roll into that. That was all I really had for Robert Livingston. The last thing was, he said he doesn't have to be Ted Lasso this year in getting everybody to believe a little bit in more of what they're trying to do. So he already has that like proven result factor from we won 9 games. Look at the turnaround we did. So even the new guys, you're not having to convince them and going, look, believe, believe, believe. No, they know they need to, catch up to the system and the train that's already moving is what I would say. Uh,
yeah,
you want to stick with defense real quick?
yeah. Let's finish
Okay.
off on that side.
Let's see. Hilo, Hilo. We were all a little confused, at least I was, on how he got that job last year because if you'll remember, he came from, was it from Michigan? Because he went to Michigan to Alabama,
He
or it was
wasn't
Alabama to
working.
Michigan to Alabama, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was Michigan for a while, but then he got hired by Alabama by Nick Saban
Yeah.
as
And I think
sort
he
of a
spent the last
consultant.
year there.
It wasn't a year. It was like he got hired like in December. Like
That's
it
what it
was
was.
shortly before they were going to play Michigan
That's right. That's right. That's right. Right.
in the CFP. I
That's
think he
right.
was just brought on as a consultant for the playoffs.
Right, right. You're 100% right. This is a guy in George Hilo who's been around the best of the best coaches and the best of the best programs. So, what an awesome voice to have. Ironically, we were in the press conference room kind of just looking into him a little bit. His
Yeah,
longest stint was at CSU, and we didn't even realize that.
yeah,
So, a strange twist of fate. He has made a massive impact. I absolutely love what he's brought to the table. I think he has the potential to be an upgrade over what they had last year at that position. Quite frankly, I think he's a really valuable asset that do not be surprised if one day he keeps climbing the ladder and ends up as a DC
yeah,
and maybe at Colorado.
yeah,
Okay. I mean that. I mean that. He's got that type of leadership skills. He's got that type of presence. He's like the next guy to me. Maybe he doesn't end up being that way. Maybe Coach Prime sees it differently, but I kind of see him like that right now. Let's see. We learned that Okunlola's out. We learned that Keaton Wade is out in spring, which is unfortunate. Those are two guys that I think could have really utilized this spring practice window
right.
for good, especially Sam Okunlola. He's a guy who really needs to work on his body. They need a big year out of him. Uh, he talked about weight room a lot for his group because I would say that is probably the one transition between last year and this year. You just have some younger guys now, maybe some guys who aren't as physically big as maybe, the as a BJ Green, right? So now you just kind of got to get those guys back up to standard, which I thought
Yeah.
was interesting. First time we got to speak to Hilo, really good to get to meet him. Great head on his shoulders, awesome role model. Just another example of a wonderful hire by Coach Prime.
Yeah, and another guy that he knocked it out of the park with his press conference. I think I think he did a great job with that, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what that group does. There was a lot talked about that trio up front last year with Warren Sapp and Damian Lewis and Vincent Dancy, who they did a great job. I think it'll be tough to top that trio, but I think Coach Prime might have, between Sapp and
We'll see.
Domotop
Yeah.
and George Hilo. This is a group that I see potentially being an upgrade of that trio. So, as good as that trio was. So, either way, if you're in the front seven for Colorado, just to be taught by those guys over this 2 year period, for those that were there last year and this year, to learn from all those different guys. How valuable is that? If you're an Arden Walker or an Anquin Barnes, an Amari McNeil, these are guys that get to learn from all those guys.
100%. Moving on, that was all I had on Hilo. Just great that he's a part of this staff and really like the guy. Domata Peko, I think through Domata, we heard confirmation on a couple of things. Apparently, Pecco said that Coach Prime called Zimmer and asked Zimmer if he had a D-line coach for him, and clearly that was Pecco, which kind of also retroactively confirmed for me our suspicions last year and our theories about how they found Robert Livingston, which was through Mike Zimmer, right? And
Yeah.
and the prior existing
Yeah, but we
relationship.
knew that.
Oh, right. Yeah, no,
Right.
I understand. It was just
Yeah.
interesting to hear
Yeah. Yeah.
that Mike Zimmer is that much of a sounding board for Coach Prime.
Right.
That's
Right.
all.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
really reveres Mike Zimmer because he's going to Mike Zimmer for recommendations and he's taking them.
Right.
Right? I mean, if you can get a recommendation, but doesn't mean you could take it. To do it twice in a row goes to show how much respect
Right.
he has for that guy.
Yeah.
I like Pecco. He's not going to be his style is different than Damian Lewis, but I think he's a very valuable addition to this coaching staff. I think he is a nurturer too, which I think is really important for this generation of kids. I think it's way more important for this generation than it was for mine or even the one that came before mine. It's very different. You have to approach these kids with a softer touch in some ways. And I think not that Lewis wasn't capable of doing that. I just think that he'll be really good at it. I think he's going
Yeah.
to excel at it just by the human being he is. From having talked to a bunch of people who covered him when he was here, everyone had glowing things to say about just the man. And we'll see what type of teacher, et cetera, he is and he becomes. But yeah, what I've realized, and we're going to talk about this here just a second, is Coach Prime has created this really cool locker room style environment for his coaching staff,
Right.
which does not exist and has not existed, quite frankly, anywhere else. You've got elite players who have retired and have been out of the game for a minute, and maybe not in Pecco's circumstance. He was playing not that long ago. But where else can you still find that locker room style camaraderie that Marshall Falk and Warren Sapp and Deion Sanders and Domata Pecco and George
Yeah.
Hegeman and Andre Gerard and Kevin Mathis, and you go down the list? Where are
Jason
you gonna
Phillips. Yeah.
Jason Phillips? Where are you gonna find that? You're not.
Yeah.
And one thing that and Byron Leftwich, one thing that's clear, and look, yeah, okay, those are all names and we know them, but there's something different to a post playing career where you can still scratch that competitive itch
Yeah.
and have that vibe. That has the makings of a very special culture and group coming together. And I just want to put it out there so we recognize it.
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you, and I will also add to this that I think that you see Coach Prime bringing in more of his friends
Mm-hmm.
that are helping coach, and I think that in some ways eases the transition from Shador and Shiloh not being here anymore.
Yep.
Is all right. Let's get some people that I am close with that that's going to help me have a better time here in Colorado. Again, we know he loves Colorado, but it's hard when your sons leave who you've been with. And so, but if you bring in Marshall Falk who you're close with, and you bring in people you're close with, you're like, okay, this is cool. And you mentioned the name Mike Zimmer, by the way. Coach Prime told us there's a couple guys coming in that you guys might say, okay, knows what he's doing. Mike Zimmer's not, he's not working anywhere, Matt. Do not be surprised if Mike Zimmer winds up somehow on this staff.
Who's the DC in Dallas?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, he was last year, but that staff
Yeah.
got fired.
No, I didn't even think. But did he get fired? Because they hired Brian Schottenheimer. Did Mike Zimmer get fired? I
Yeah,
didn't see
he's
that.
not there.
I don't
He's
work. I don't work in major radio anymore. Okay, yeah, he's not returning. Well, there you go. Well, then shoot, Brian. I'd be shocked if he isn't in Boulder already.
yeah. So look, I mean, Mike
No, it would
Zimmer
be
is
a
a
great
big time
addition. Yeah,
mentor to him, and so
yeah.
don't be surprised
Wow, I missed that entirely. I'm
if
glad
that's
you brought that
the
up.
we know one of the big names now is Byron Leftwich.
Yeah,
I mean, it was like a few days later that kind of came out, but don't be surprised if Mike Zimmer's that other one. So, Coach Prime's surrounding himself with people that he likes and trusts, and I think that he's always done that. But I think that's a key part of what he's doing this offseason too. Is that I think that that's sort of this might be too deep, but like filling a void a little bit from
yeah. I
Shador and
agree with you.
Shiloh and Travis and those guys not being there anymore. So
I don't think that's very controversial. I think that's absolutely what he's doing. It's way more fun to come to work when you
yeah,
actually enjoy the people you're
right.
coming to work
Hmm.
with. Okay? That's absolutely. And for some people, that might not be a good thing to bring on
Right.
your friends cuz working with your friends is tricky. So I think at the outset, it was like, okay, is he hiring his friends or is he hiring No, no, no. It's a bit of both. He knows what
But
he's doing and
I
he's
also
proved that.
yes, and I also think he's not just bringing in all of his buddies because
No, of course not.
if that I mean I think he's bringing in people he likes and trusts to
Right.
do the job well.
Right.
And because, there's some other people that we know he's friends with that are not on the staff, and so
Yeah.
that I think that there's that combination. And so I like what he's doing. And look, Matt, out of all the years we've covered CU, how many times could we talk about some of the dysfunction that we heard about on the
Oh
coaching
my
staff?
gosh.
And as much as some people want to
Ridiculous.
bring that up, the dysfunction around the CU's program right now, it's not there. And
What dysfunction?
I haven't heard word one about dysfunction on the staff because of what you're talking about, that what Coach Prime has built. And so
Yeah.
I think it might be the closest knit football staff CU's had
And I've been around for sure.
since I've been around. I mean, a long
Easy.
time,
Yeah.
So um
That's
I
not
know,
even a question for me.
yeah, but I think that's a huge deal,
Agreed. Agreed.
because the dysfunction that we'd hear about from some of the coaching staff, you would hear it from players that would
Oh
tell
yeah.
us
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
So the players see that, and that
You
impacts
mean
what the
in
lock.
regimes past?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Not
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
talking about this regime at
No, no, no.
all.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking
Oh my
about
God. I
previous
used to hear
staffs,
about
and
it all
so
the time.
yeah. And when
Undermining, yeah,
and you would hear it
backstabbing.
from the players that would tell you off the record, and so yeah, when you're hearing it from players, that means they're seeing it, and that's going to impact how they play. Everything we've heard is this staff gets along really well. And I'm talking about the first staff, 2023, 2024. And this staff is new in some ways, but Coach Prime has always done a good job of really developing a staff or building a staff that, can work well together. And so, that's another one of his attributes that I don't think gets talked about enough.
Agreed. The only other defensive coach we spoke to was Coach Sapp, and there really wasn't a ton to dig into other
Mhm.
than he's awesome, right?
Yeah.
And what a luxury it is. And I think I brought this up last week, but I had somebody who's a current successful professional athlete text me and go, "You have any idea? Do you have any idea what it says about Deion Sanders that Hall of Famers are willing to leave their homes and come work for very little money compared to what they already have
Yeah.
because they want to be there for him?" Like, do you understand what that means? And so, yeah, it's a big deal. Coach Sapp is fantastic, and he's learning. He's addicted to coaching now, which was obvious last year. He's so infectious, and his energy is so great. He, along with Coach Livingston last year, really helped to with Coach Lewis, and I'm not, shading credit from anybody else, but I think you can point to Coach Sapp and Coach Livingston as the two biggest reasons that Colorado's defense did a 180. The energy that Sapp brought was infectious every single day.
Mhm.
It makes a difference. And Coach Livingston, obviously, we spoke about him. That
I'm
was
gonna
really
I'm
all.
gonna I'm gonna throw Mathis in there too, just because of the way
Sure.
Livingston's talk about him. But I agree with you.
I meant the additions. I just meant the
Yeah,
newer additions in year
yeah,
two compared to the guys who were here from year
right.
one, right?
Yeah,
Because Mathis was here in year one and did
yeah,
a great job in year one, by the
yeah,
way. I just meant the two guys they added that really turned the boat. I think it was those two personally.
yeah.
Um, and Hilo for that matter.
Right.
Um, because Hilo would come down from the box and he was Robert Livingston's eyes and ears, and he'd get on that whiteboard. You'd see him on well off. He's excellent on the
Yeah,
whiteboard. Part of the reason why I think he'll be a great DC one day. Okay, offense. Shermer. Okay, huge year for Pat Shermer. Without Shadur, who was their quasi offensive coordinator, right? I mean, let's just call it
yeah,
what it is. He had more control over a college offense than any quarterback I've ever heard of.
yeah,
I mean, would you agree with that?
yeah. I mean, I would I don't know, but I would assume that maybe Peyton Manning had some of that when he was at Tennessee, but I don't even
Maybe
know.
that was the 90s.
It's a,
I'm
I mean,
not, yeah.
all I know of is covering Colorado, and I don't think any quarterback that I've covered has ever had the kind of influence on the offense that Shador had.
Yeah. Shermer said he was itching to get back at it. He talked about his top priority is rebuilding and replacing a quarterback. So clearly that was where their focus was, which is obvious. But I think it just needed to be said that it was replacing Shadur. He's like, we're not going
Yeah,
to replace him, but we've got to replace him. You know,
yeah,
we it's not going to be easy. He mentioned the offense isn't going to change a lot. He said they've got a year with time on task, which I think was very telling because I think you'll see some shifts, but you're going to see more of a shift in the execution of what's called.
yeah,
Um, okay, awkward thing that I didn't really know how to approach, but I guess I'll just say it plainly. Two guys threw Shadur under the bus for their lack of a running game. One was Shermer, slightly, and one was Falk. Shermer said, what was the line specifically? You know, he was essentially talking about how they called the plays. And look, when I say threw under the bus, I mean like pointed to as a major reason why they weren't running the ball. It's just what happened. I don't know what to say. He said, look, when you've got guys like Jimmy and LeJontay on the edges, you know, I can't blame Shadur for wanting to go outside there. And sure, were there some more times where if we would have handed the ball off to some guys, maybe we would have hit it or we would have done that. So clearly, everybody was saying without saying, look, we had Shadur. We want to put the ball in Shadur's hands. And
yeah.
Shadur wanted the ball in his
Jordan
hands.
Jordan Seaton was saying the same thing.
Yep. Yep.
So
So
and I don't like I don't like the term throw under the bus. I get what you're
that's fine.
saying, but you're right, and that's what
We'd
they're
be
saying
arguing
is like
semantically there. You
right.
know
But
what I mean? Yeah.
what they're saying is like, look, we had Shador, we had all those receivers. That's why we were throwing the ball so much.
Mm-hmm.
So
Which is partially true. You know,
yeah,
I just think they were trying to go, and even Coach Falk, you know, was like, it was great watching Shador throw the football. It was
yeah.
great seeing him do that.
Well, no, let's do the full thing there because what he was asked was from afar, what did you think of watching CU's run game this last year? And he
Right.
paused and he goes, "It was great watching Shador throw the football this last year."
Right. And
That
so that's
says a
what I'm
lot
trying.
right there. Yeah,
That's what I'm trying to say is
yeah,
you had two guys that pointed at Shador as the reason Colorado wasn't running. Let's just
yeah,
call it what it is. Okay.
yeah,
And look, I don't know. We're not behind the scenes. I'm just reading what they tell us in body language. Um, Shermer said we were in 10 a lot because we didn't have the tight end room we needed last year. That's also very telling
yeah,
because Savell Smalls as a converted defensive end was their only option at tight end last year, and it held them back in many ways. I still do not think that problem has been rectified. I think
yeah,
Zach Atkins is a player. I think hopefully he'll be a factor. I don't believe either of the freshmen will factor in whatsoever beyond anything but special teams. So
yeah.
they still need to add there. That needs to be a top priority in the spring portal. If you ask me, you need guys who are versatile. They can move around so you can run the damn ball. Okay, Kansas
Yeah,
State. I mean, you just BYU. That's how these teams do it. You keep
yeah,
other teams on their toes by disguising what you're doing formationally and being versatile and based upon the personnel that's on the field, being able to get into different looks based upon what the defense is giving you. You need a couple of guys who could be Swiss Army knives for you. So
right.
I just don't think they're there yet. Um,
I'll say real quick.
yeah,
I think that with Zach Atkins, with Savell Smalls and with Sam Hart being healthy, you would think in the fall, I think they're better,
Yeah,
but I agree with you that they're not there yet.
they're just not done. They're just not done. I'm not saying they're
I
not
would
better.
love to see another true tight end be added through the transfer portal at some point this summer.
All I'm saying.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
Coach
just saying I
Shermer's.
think they're better.
Oh, they definitely are.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they
Yeah.
definitely are. Atkins looks like he could be a factor.
Yeah.
Okay, me even saying that he could be in the competition should really speak volumes because
Yeah.
the last 2 years, Traore and Mateer, we both thought were going to be factors here, and we're out before they got the check. So,
Right.
jury's
Yeah.
still out. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Um, Shermer called the running back room underutilized, which is interesting. Probably was. Um, but again, for more of the same reasons that Shador just, wanted to. Here's a bubble to Lejante, who's a better athlete. We have a better chance to pick up some yards. And I get why Shador did it. Okay. Like, I'm not questioning what it was, but the fact is that they didn't do it. And whether it was underutilized or not, I think that kind of that point goes in relation to how good they are, and
Yeah.
that remains to be seen.
Yeah.
He admitted that he learned the structure of college football in his first year, that he was really learning. That was one thing he said the other day. He's like, I really didn't know. I had to pick it all up on the fly year one. And then year two, he felt like he was putting it together. So now it's different. So hopefully entering year three for Pat Shermer at the college level, he is more comfortable, Brian, because he said you climb the mountain a bit differently each year.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you took away from Shermer?
No, I think that's pretty much it. And I'm glad he's back because I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. I know there's a lot of people that maybe don't love this offense, and I think there's still Broncos fans and Buffs fans that are maybe scarred by those Broncos years. But I like Pat Shermer. I think that I love talking to him. I think he's been great for us media wise. But I'm looking forward to seeing what he does um, because of what we're talking about. And I'm not at all putting down Shador Sanders. I think that he was fantastic, but I'm looking forward to seeing this be more of a Pat Shermer offense and maybe more of Pat's stamp on the
Yeah.
offense than he was able to do. Well, I don't know about able, but more than he did because I think he liked to listen a lot to Shador and
As he
it
should have.
worked, and he should have. Like, look,
Yeah.
again, I'm not putting down Shador because
No, no, no,
that
no, no.
offense was really good last year, and they were fun to watch. And anytime they got on the field, it didn't always work, but I felt confident they were going to go score because Shador was out there. And so
Right.
I just think we still have yet. We're going into year three. I think we still have yet to see what Pat Shermer can really do with the college offense because year one was he still he took the keys to Sean Lewis's offense. And year
Yep.
two, he's got Shador, who, like you said, is that quasi offensive coordinator. Um, they're not going to have that with this year's quarterbacks. I think it's going to be Pat Shermer and his offense. I think Marshall Falk's going to have some influence on that. Marshall Falk, he said, he goes, look, he goes, we're going to be better running the football. He goes, I don't really care what you think what last year's was, but we're going to be better running the football. I think that those guys, those two in particular, the offensive line coaches too, but I think that Falk and Shermer, those two are going to be key in putting more emphasis on the run game. I think we're going to see more of a Shermer offense, and there's some that would listen to that and say, "Oh no," but I honestly want to see it. I'm excited to see what he does in college with his offense.
Okay, which leads me right into Marshall Falk. I concur with a lot of everything that you just said there. This
Yeah,
is the first time stylistically we're going to see what it looks like because even Shermer himself the other day brought up how even Lewis and Salter need some time to develop within the system, right? So,
yeah,
as we all expected. So,
yeah.
Coach Falk, weird and wild and another Hall of Famer, right? I had the video game Madden 2003, right? I mean, he was unbelievable.
Yeah.
What a player. And just another one of those like pinch yourself moments where you're like, God, he got Marshall Falk to come be their running backs
Now,
coach. It's pretty
real
crazy. Yeah.
quick, I didn't play Madden
Yeah.
back then. I've never been a video game guy, but
Yeah.
since you played it,
Yeah.
was Falk in Madden 2003 like
Freak.
was he Bo
Freak.
Jackson Tecmo Bowl type?
100%. Yeah. I
Really?
mean,
Okay. All right.
Falk was great. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was also a damn good player in real life
Yes,
too.
I
I
know.
mean,
I know.
Marshall was incredible.
Yeah.
And Coach Prime has talked about how he reveres his offensive mind. So I asked him, I wanted him to kind of like share a little bit of that secret sauce with us. He didn't
Yeah.
really. He didn't really do it quite the way that I had wanted him to, but whatever. He's getting comfortable, which is
Yeah.
what I picked up from that first meeting. He is transitioning out of the self-image of a player right now. He's in that phase. We watched Warren Sapp go through it, right? To a degree, to a smaller degree. Sapp showed up, I would say, a little bit more hungry, or at least his personality dictated that. I don't know.
Well,
Um,
I agree with you, but I think that transition happened quietly for Sapp in year
hmm,
one when he wasn't on the staff,
maybe,
but he was around a lot
maybe, yeah.
and
Good point.
he could
Good
just
point.
kind of be around the guys. I think that sort of
Yeah,
transition
really good
happened
point.
there.
Yeah, Falk is going to have to do it on the
Yeah.
job. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. But I could tell that he's still trying to shift that just a little bit, which
Yeah.
look, he's a Hall of Famer. That should not be
Right.
an easy switch
Right.
to turn on and off if you're not comfortable with it. He doesn't believe they were as bad as the numbers say. Okay. I mean, probably in that when you look at the averages of some of the stuff they did, there were games where they were ripping off runs at around 4.5 yards per carry. They just didn't do it very much. So
Right.
maybe if they had committed and gone about it a different way, they would have been better. But I would just say, and look, I'm looking forward to seeing him open Pandora's box in the backfield. I
Yeah.
really hope he's able to do that because if he is, and he's able to reestablish the balance along with Pat Shermer to this offense, Colorado will be a national title contender eventually once they get the right pieces in place. It'll just take time. They
Yeah.
don't have the system to do that yet, if I'm being quite honest with you. They've got to develop it, which is why Coach Prime talked about how one of his biggest differences between last offseason and this offseason was marrying the personnel with the switching of the coaches and to find the right guys for the right time to get them to where they need to go. Let's see. He talked about how he's going to go see Sean Payton because Sean Payton was his running backs coach. Obviously, Sean Payton, the head coach of the Broncos, which I thought was pretty cool. I'm pretty bummed we haven't seen the Sean Payton Coach Prime crossover. It's 2 years now, and
Yeah.
I know these are two really busy guys. The Broncos and the Buffs need to make that happen
Yeah.
somehow because
Yeah.
I've been at Broncos training camp and I was there all last season. And I saw, multiple different times Coach Mo and some of the guys, come down, bringing some of the kids down to watch, Broncos training camp. But I think those two Wonder Twins unite because they have both spoken glowingly about each other. It
Yeah.
is a 40-minute drive. I think that would be a
We
good
haven't
thing to
seen them
make
together
happen.
yet. Do you remember, by the way, when he said that? Do you know where Sean Payton was his running backs coach?
Indy or was it St. Louis? I don't know, actually.
San Diego State.
Oh my God. Was that what he was talking about?
Yep.
I hadn't
Hmm.
put two and two together yet.
Yep. Sean
That's
Payton,
crazy.
1992 and 93, San Diego State running backs
All
coach.
right. What I will do is I will text my buddy Mike Kliss, who is the Broncos guy. So the next time he talks to Sean Payton, when the time is appropriate, to get us a good Marshall Falk story,
Yeah.
I will. I will talk to the Broncos media about that one specifically. Great nugget there. I absolutely
They
love that.
never worked together. Um, they were never in the same spot in the NFL.
Well, that makes sense because I was
Yeah.
confused. Because
Yeah.
I was really confused, and I was like, must have been like Marshall's earliest.
Yeah.
But I don't remember Sean Payton on the St. Louis staff, and I don't remember him in Indianapolis
Because
because
that's
he
why
was
I
with
looked it up. I was like, because
because
I remember Peyton with the Giants and with the
the
Saints.
Eagles. He was the Eagles for a little while. I believe he was a
Yeah.
quarterbacks
But
coach
it
for a
was
while.
San Diego State.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's not only Coach Falk's first year in Boulder, which is a big transition for him. It's
Yeah.
also his first year in coaching. So I think for him, he's just got to get his feet wet. Let's see how he goes through the first spring and evaluating what they have, what they don't have. I did see Brandon Hood with Colton. I want to say last week I was up at CU getting an MRI done, and I saw those two. Brandon wasn't as big as I remembered, so I don't know. I don't know what to expect out of that group other than I really like the potential of Isaiah Augustive moving forward because I think he proved last year that he deserves some carries this season.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think everybody else needs to earn it based upon what they showed last year. Not that it's not there. You and I disagree a little bit about the running back room, But welcome Marshall Falk to Boulder, Colorado,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited about it. I think that he's going to be really good for this group. And um, yeah, I hope we talk to him every now and then because I love listening to him talk about football. And so
Very
I'm looking
smart.
forward to that.
All right, moving on to the offensive line trio, the new trio. No returners, right? I mean,
Yeah.
nobody. I mean, Gunnar White was he? What was he last year? Technically, an offensive line assistant,
Analysts. Yeah. I think
analyst. Okay,
analysts. Yeah.
okay. So he is now the O line coach, and Hageman and Gerard are his assistants. Correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. One thing that you ask yourself about Gunnar White is this is a white man who did not play in the NFL. Okay? Let's just put our cards on the table. Those guys got to prove that they know their stuff to get hired by Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
And what you can tell about Gunnar White is he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm
Mhm.
not saying anything. I'm just pointing it out there that it doesn't fit the mold of what they're typically looking for. So if you find that, you probably are a pretty special dude. That's number one. That was the first thing I was looking for. Gunnar White brings a savvy, he brings a compassion and a relationship and a relatability with younger players that I have yet to see from an O-line coach. I have not seen that before for like a Gen Z O-line coach. This guy might be really good, Brian. I'm telling you
Yeah.
right now, because there's a lot of these O-line coaches who are hard asses screaming all the time. And I don't know how much that really is effective anymore with those type of guys.
Yeah.
Like I don't. I think you need some of it, but I think Gunnar White could end up being a really good coach.
Yeah.
I think he could. So clearly he knows his stuff. Otherwise, Coach Prime never hires him with his resume. That's number one, right? I mean, are we agreed? He worked
Yeah.
his way up as a student
Well,
manager.
yes. And I will tell you, I agree with what you're saying, although I would say it a different way in that um, my initial thought is yes, he doesn't fit that mold. I think there's two different molds for what Coach Prime looks for. And one of them
Okay.
is yes, you know your stuff. A former player. That's what a lot of his staff is, right? Former players, big time players, NFL guys. The other mold is you work hard and prove yourself.
Yep.
And that's the mold. I think there's two different molds for Coach Prime, and that's the mold that Gunnar White fits is the work hard and prove yourself. Because a guy like Michael Pollock was not an NFL
There-
player either,
yeah.
but he's been a loyal guy to Coach Prime that works hard and proves he knows his stuff. So I think there are two different molds.
Are those the last two standing though
Oh, I don't know. I mean,
in that mold? Because he came in with more of those guys.
well, but no, because I think if you look around the entire staff, there's probably I think as you go deeper in the staff,
Insignificant. I'm talking about significant positions.
maybe so.
Okay, I'm just asking.
I'd have
I'm
to
just
off the
asking.
top of my head. I
My
mean,
point is, there's something special,
Brett Bartolone didn't play in the league, you know.
right? But he's also not the position that he came in as anymore,
Right.
and Trevor Riley wasn't either for
Yeah.
different reasons. But I'm just
Yeah.
saying, like that, as they've gotten to a different level, has decreased. I'm just putting it all out there.
Yeah.
It's all factual. Okay. So what I really like about Gunner or Coach White is his insistence on running the ball. He said,
Yeah.
we have to run the ball. It is a non-negotiable. He was more serious about it than Coach Prime was, or at least spoke about it with more reverence than Coach Prime did, or that Marshall Falk did, or quite frankly, Hageman or Gerard did. Gunnar
Yeah.
White, that was a very personal issue for him.
Or Shermer.
Or Shermer.
Yeah.
Shermer.
Yeah.
Great point. Great point, Brian. And he said, this was really smart. He said the team is going to have to depend on the offensive line this year to be successful, which I loved because he's dead on. Last year they didn't really have to. The last 2 years they didn't really have to. Their success wasn't generated up front. Moving forward it will be.
Yeah.
Moving forward, it will be in the trenches. I asked him what he targeted in the transfer portal. He said athletes and size. You have to be powerful to be able to mix up the scheme, which is what he felt like they didn't have enough of last year, is
Yeah.
guys who could really be powerful and do some different things. And they maybe got boxed into what they could do based upon the personnel that they had, was the impression that I got from him.
Yeah.
Does that sound
Yeah.
about similar?
Yeah. And when you look at what they've got in the transfer portal, they've got athletes and size.
Right. And the other part of that is he said he tried to get length because he likes the versatility of bigger guys to screw down. So one of the things that you and I have talked about is how they kind of practice these guys at both guard and tackle. Well, he wanted to go get bigger guys because he's like, you don't put short guards at tackle and have it work. If you
Yeah,
want to do that and make it work, you get tall tackles and put them at guard, and then you might be okay. It doesn't work
yeah,
the other way, which I think that was kind of his way of saying the Tyler Brown thing was never going to work in the first place, right?
right. Yeah,
That
yeah,
was how I interpreted that.
right.
Talked about Zy Chrysler. Loves Zy Chrysler. Loves Mana Taimani. Sounds like they've already made a very strong impression on that room in total. I don't know how much you can take to the bank, but I would say it's a pretty safe bet that those two guys are going to be in the starting lineup this year.
Yeah. Zy Chrysler for sure. We'll see on Monotamani.
He called
Um,
him the dad of the room, and he's been, from what I've seen in practice, he's been good. So I would just say
yeah,
they've made an impression. Maybe they don't
yeah,
start, but I would say they'll be factors. They'll be at least rotation guys if they don't find a solid five.
yeah,
Um, Sounds like Philip Houston's doing pretty well from that recovery too, huh?
yeah. It doesn't sound like he'll be back this spring, which is not unusual. You
Right.
have a knee injury, you usually don't participate in spring. So let's just hope he's ready for the fall because he needs to be because there's some guys now that are getting some reps that he could definitely use right now, and so it'll be interesting to see him back in that competition in the fall. But it sounds like he is doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he spoke about Cash having really, a big impact there. Is he on scholarship yet?
No,
Well,
not that I know of.
there's your scholarship candidate for the fall, by the way.
Yeah.
Didn't Offerdahl get it last year? It'll be
Yep.
Cleveland this year. I'd be shocked if it wasn't. Um, yeah, so I would say that's it. Just the one thing I'll say about Gunnar White is he brings a different perspective than a George Hegeman or an Andre Girard as
Hmm.
somebody that didn't achieve personally at the highest of levels. So that's another perspective from which to relate to somebody, because when you do have the Girards, the Hegemans, guys who've made it, guys who are, see it, feel it, taste it, touch it, tangible, having success, that can be intimidating, especially to younger players. And sometimes a different voice, not that I think either one of those two guys are even close to intimidating, it would just be the
Yeah.
stature. Gunnar White could maybe come about it from a different perspective, which is where I think Coach Prime has really mastered the whole you can have as many coaches as you want.
Yeah.
You really don't see that around the country from other people. I'd have to go look room by room, but as far as I know, he might be the only one doing it this way on both lines.
Yeah.
Because it's
And
not just D line, it's O line too.
yeah, and I like what Andre Gerard said. He's like, look, you got 16 guys in there, and it helps to have three guys saying the same thing. But I think there's going to be guys that hear Andre's message. It's the same. They're going to hear it from Andre different than they
Differently.
hear it from Gunnar White or they hear it from George Hageman. And there's just an example. I don't know who this guy likes. I'm just going to use an example, like a Tyler Brown.
Sure.
He might really connect with George Hageman,
Sure.
but not as much with Gunnar White or Andre Garrod, right?
Just a hypothetical. Yeah.
Hypothetical. And so
Yeah.
same with Zy Chrysler. He might
Yeah.
really connect with Gunnar White and not as much with the other two. And so but when the message is the same, I think they're all on the same page, but they deliver it a different way.
And I loved that one of our colleagues, what was it, Scotty? Scotty, who asked him about Chauncey Gooden and him recruiting Chauncey Gooden.
Yeah.
You could, I really like the way he talked about him because he talked about him as a human being. He said, I'm
Yeah.
really proud of that young man,
Yeah.
because he's known him for a long time. There's a real care factor there with Gunnar White that I think's special.
Yeah.
This guy passes a smell test because I think for a lot of people you go, who?
Yeah.
Kind of like we did with Robert Livingston. But obviously, you're giving Coach Prime the benefit of the doubt because he found people. So you go, okay, all right. So
Right.
let me see what he found about you. Oh, I see it. I see what he found in you now. I see the traits that he found in you, and I just think he's gonna be good. I think he's gonna be a
Yeah.
good hire. I do because at first I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I mean, look, I trust him, so okay.
Yeah.
You don't know based upon the resume, right? So
Yeah. I agree with you.
everybody needs a shot, and Coach Prime isn't afraid to give guys a shot if you prove that you can handle it. And I think Gunnar White has proved that.
Yeah.
Moving on to Gerard, great to see a Colorado legend back in the fold. No,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I believe he's one of the guys with he is. He's one of the guys with his picture up in the IPF as Buff Legends. And so you have to kind of go to the end of the IPF to just see it. It's not like one of the ones out there in the middle, but it's up there because he's one of the Colorado's greats. And so if any of those offensive linemen don't know who he is, just go to the end of the IPF. I think it's the north end zone. You can see it from up there.
yeah,
And yeah, I think it's great to have him back.
I do too. I just think that's important. It's the first former Buff that Coach Prime has hired to the coaching staff himself. I think that's a big deal. I think
Yeah,
having that alumnus connection makes a difference. Because there's a guy, just send Gerard on stage to do the fight song. Go ahead.
yeah,
You know what I
right.
mean? Like I don't have to go up there and pretend like I know it now. Like I just go you go handle it. If we're gonna do that or the tradition or the connection, I think it's cool to have.
Yes,
Not to mention, I think he's a great dude. Number one, I loved his assessment of Jordan Seaton. One thing he said, age doesn't necessarily determine maturity, which obviously we've been talking about how
yeah,
mature Jordan Seaton is. But the one thing that he sees out of Seaton is he wants feedback on every play. He's chasing it. He
yeah,
wants it really badly. And again, it's not that Hageman or White didn't notice that, but Gerard noticed it and said, you know what? That's one of the most important characteristics of this young man, and it's what really drives him. And maybe one other guy sees it one way and one other guy sees it another way. But if you have a coach that sees that specific trait in you, the chasing the greatness, the wanting the feedback, the constant critiquing, and you have a coach that sees that you're a player with that type of thirst for knowledge, that's when you just start pouring everything into those kids.
yeah,
Those are the kids that you let them soak it all up because they're going to.
yeah,
And something that Coach White mentioned as well, Jordan Seaton is now the leader in many ways of not just that group, but he's becoming one of the leaders of the team if
yeah,
he's not already.
right. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I love Andre Garad there. I think that he's going to be, he was the third addition to that room. I think he's going to be a great addition.
Yeah, he said he appreciated the facilities that they had now. It's certainly better
Yeah,
than what it was when he was there. And he talked about how Coach Prime wants to develop the man. And if you develop the man, you get way more out of the athlete, which I think a lot of coaches miss. A
yeah,
lot of coaches just develop. But if you show these kids that you care about them, it's a different relationship back and forth, which is important. I just like all these little coaching things. For those of you who know and don't know, I do some coaching on the side of different sports, and it's always something that I'm dialed into, Brian. Like, what
yeah,
makes a coach tick, and does this guy really get it? And I would say there isn't anybody who Coach Prime sends up there in front of us who does not get it. And in the past, with other coaches, there have been some other guys where you're like, "Are you sure you get this?
yeah,
Are you sure? You're gonna." I'm not gonna call anybody out. Anyway, Hageman, the elevation there, the leadership. I think him having more of a vocal presence continued, this year is going to be a great thing. He's so smart. All these guys are so smart, but I love the leadership and the self-confidence that he preaches and the assurance. And he's a guy who was able to be a fly on the wall last year and
yeah,
now kind of gets to jump into more of an hands-on role. I think that's going to pay dividends for them because I think he really gets it, and he
yeah,
probably sat on a few things because of his position that now that he has more of a voice, I bet he was in the door with ideas day one. That's the type of
yeah,
guy, to me, George Hageman is.
yeah. I agree with you. And he's a guy that he played multiple positions. He played tackle and guard, I believe. Garay played uh, center and guard. And so they've got some of those different looks and different views you can see from on different players. And so um, uh, George Hager might look at, you know, uh, we keep using the example of Tyler Brown and say, look, no, that's not a tackle. We need him at guard.
Mm-hmm.
He might look at Zy Chrysler and say, you know what? He was a guard here, but I think he's a tackle for us. And so there's different things he might see out of players that those other guys aren't going to see. And so you're right. I just think that's what makes this trio. I wrote about it this weekend, but I think that's what makes this trio kind of fascinating to me is you've got the two guys who were NFL players. They both played multiple positions in kind of different spots. And then you have a Gunnar White who's sort of the organizer and he knows his stuff too. but he sees it from a different perspective. I think that's what's kind of fascinating about this trio.
Yeah. Hageman called Zy Chrysler a dog. He said he
Yeah,
asks all the right questions. And you and I had questions a little bit about Zy Chrysler, even though he was all Big Ten honorable mention a couple of times.
yeah,
But PFF had him constantly graded out as
not
Illinois'
very
worst.
high. Yeah,
Yeah, as their worst lineman. It was very,
yeah,
very strange. So we were curious about that. And everybody so far has nothing but great things to say about Zy Chrysler, which is awesome.
right,
I love that. He talked about this team needs to find an identity. They don't have an identity, and hopefully they
Mhm.
can find one faster than they did at certain times in the past. Was essentially what he was saying. He talked about how this coaching staff has fine tuned what they want out of freshmen, which is why IMG appeals to them so much because you have guys that are ready to hit the ground running and aren't
yeah,
knuckleheads coming out
yeah,
of IMG. You can't be a knucklehead and survive at IMG. You're never going to
yeah,
make it.
yeah,
So, that's kind of like a stamp that you're not going to have those stupid problems that you might have with some other projects of kids who, maybe just didn't have that type of coaching or that access or those resources, or maybe they weren't that good. So, cool to see that as they're fine tuning what they want out of their freshmen, what they want out of the portal, they've also fine tuned what they need out of the coaching staff.
right,
He also said every year is going to be a different team. Every year is going to be a different team. There's no more team building. From
yeah,
year to year to year, it's completely different. And even if you have a lot of the same guys, it's going to be different, especially here with Coach Prime and how they're going to approach recruiting in the portal. And the one last thing that Hageman brought up, he said, we're not replacing Shador and Travis. We're finding new ones,
yeah,
which I liked. I like putting it that way that no, we don't have to just replace those guys. We got to find new Shadors and new Travises and, new the Draylons and the Omarions and the Jujus and, those type of guys. So I like putting it that way because you're not going to replace Travis and Shador. That's the one
right.
thing we know. You've got to find new ones. You got to find guys who are different and, they're their own names. So I like the way he put that.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's how you build a program, right? Is the best programs don't lose a Shador or Travis caliber player, and then they're not very good for a
Right.
while. The good programs have new guys like that, and Alabama's maybe the extreme example, but you look at, I mean, who are the quarterbacks they've had in the last decade, right? You go from I mean, you got Jalen Hurts, you got Tua, you
Right.
got um Mac Jones, so I know
AJ McCarron,
AJ McCarron, you got oh my gosh, who was the kid this last year?
Bryce Young,
Yeah,
this
or
year,
Bryce Young,
Jalen Milrow.
yeah, Jalen Milrow. So I mean, they've had how many stars, and running back the same thing, receiver the same thing, and so yes, Alabama's the extreme. Those are the best programs as they continually produce NFL type guys. Um, I mean, you don't even have to go that high. I mean, look at like and Oregon does that, right? The good programs they continually produce NFL guys. Utah, right?
Yeah.
Utah is more of probably a CU level team right now. They just continually, Utah is going to have 5 or 6 plus draft picks every year. The Buffs have got to get to that point.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't know that they might be after this season. I was thinking about that the other day. I
Yeah,
was like, I don't know if they will after this season. It might look a little bit more like it did last year, but I could be wrong on that one. I hope I am. Um, Michael Pollock, that's a guy who I questioned when Coach Prime made the hire. Like, okay, another one of those that he must have earned your trust, and clearly he has. Right?
yeah,
He has been around Shador and Travis a lot. He's kind of been their liaison in certain situations. Like I saw this weekend, he was at the Bolitnikoff ceremony, I believe it was, with Travis as, the coaching staff's representative there, which I think says a lot. He has earned Coach Prime's trust, and he's not afraid to say what's on his mind. I think that some people could be intimidated, but he's comfortable,
yeah,
in his own skin and with the role that Coach Prime has asked him to fill. And I really liked his approach to the few topics we had to discuss with him. I thought it was interesting. He brought up how Coach Prime was very disappointed they didn't have more returns.
yeah,
I thought that was interesting because, to
yeah,
be honest with you, with how much they have to juggle, that part of it, I don't even really that doesn't even really register with me because that's like, there's a Cajun word, lon yop, which means like a little extra or like a cherry on top. That's the lon yop of football is like, the return game. But he brought up that that's one of Coach Prime's signatures, and he wants a team that's representative of kind of the image of the style that he played, right?
Yeah. And I think he's more talking about punt returns,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
kickoff
yeah.
returns, you can't,
No,
the
no,
other
that's
team's
what I
putting
meant.
putting them
That's
through
what I
the end
meant.
zone. But yeah, I mean, they had the one punt return from LaJonte, but I think Pollock said like Coach Prime wants three or four of those
Hmm.
in a season. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he does with that group, and it certainly helps. He kind of joked about it, but it's true. It certainly helps. He has Buck Buchanan to where kickoff team doesn't have to do as much. They don't have to spend as much time on kickoff team because they know that as long as Buck Buchanan's healthy, that as he did last year, I think it's 90 to 95% of the kickoffs are going to go through the end zone.
Yeah, and this is another one that Coach Pollock acknowledged Coach Prime's growth and learning as a coach himself, and said, "I can see it in him. From year to year to year, he's gotten better and better, and he's grown more and more and learned more." So I think it's also important to have guys like that on your coaching staff that aren't afraid to say that about you, because there's a lot
Yeah,
of coaches that. Especially with Deion Sanders, there'd be a lot of guys intimidated to say anything but glowing things. There are plenty of them around the program, let us assure you.
yeah,
But what you can't have those guys in decision making roles around you. You need people who aren't afraid and intimidated to speak their mind. And that also goes to who Coach Prime is and the culture that he has nurtured under him, but it goes to who Coach Pollock is as well. So I just wanted to give him credit for that, because I think it's important that you have sounding boards around you. He talked about Cam Michael and Draylon Miller kick return, Quanell Farrakhan, Quentin Gibson, maybe Isaiah Harge punt return,
yeah,
which I thought was interesting. And then of course I asked him about what they're going to do when they get across midfield and it's 4th and 7. And are they going to kick a 54-yarder, or are they going to go
yeah,
for it on 4th and 8, right? That the problem they ran into many times. And he basically said, look, Mata has earned Coach Prime's trust, and he's earned that job from short to intermediate. And that's the way it's going to go.
yeah,
So I would say that the chances of Buck Buch they if they get an opportunity within the first couple of weeks, they have to send Buck Buchanan out there. They
yeah,
have to. Because you have to figure it out immediately if that's going to be your strategy for the season, if you feel
right.
comfortable. Because just because he made a 52-yarder doesn't mean he's going to be nails every time. He needs to prove consistently enough that he can knock those through for that to even be a part of your game plan.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you should just go back to the way they did it last year and ride out the string with Mata. I get
yeah,
really nervous when you talk about field goal kicking by committee, because I think field goal kicker barely gets any opportunities as it is. You want that guy to be in rhythm, and you want him to be able to, judge the different distances on his kicks a little bit. So I think being a bombing specialist can be tricky. We'll see. We'll see on that one.
yeah,
I think that'll be a lot like what it was last year.
yeah. I don't. I think it's anything beyond 45. I think send out Buchanan. I'd be shocked if anything under 45 Buchanan gets the call.
Yeah.
But if it's 46, 47, I think Mata's long as
For
47,
yeah.
but that's stretching him.
Cincinnati.
I think that's stretching him, and so I think anything beyond 45 is like Buck, you're heading out there. So I could see both of them being like, you know, Mata with 12 field goal attempts and Buchanan with 7 or 8.
Well, that's only if
You
they
know,
trust Buchanan, though. I'm just saying, like, that's only if they
sure,
really believe in him, because otherwise you're going to take the ball out of your offense's hands.
right.
And I think it'll just, I don't agree that if it's anything beyond 45, they're just automatically going to send him out. I think he's going to have to earn that, because
No, I don't. I don't. I don't.
that's a
I
big
don't necessarily
trust
think
situation.
automatically send him out. I just think it'll never be. I would never
Oh,
send
to never
Mata
be
out
Mata. Yeah, I got
beyond
you. I got you.
45. But I mean,
I got you.
I think with Buchanan's leg, it's yeah, he's gonna have to earn that trust I think
By
to your
doing it.
point in week 1 against Georgia Tech, if it's the end of the first half and it's fourth and whatever, and it's a 53-yard field goal, send Buchanan out there. If he makes it, great. Next time you're in that opportunity, he does it again. He makes it, great. Now all of a sudden, that's your guy.
Yeah. I mean, even in like that Wyoming game, if you've got a 46-yarder, let's see what Buck can do. Like
Right.
that, like you've got to cross that. You just have to figure that out early in the year. That's all I'm saying. You can
Yeah.
go that way, but you got to know what way you're going so you don't end up in week 6 and being like, what should I do? By
Yeah.
week 3, you want to know what the plan is, and hopefully it doesn't even take that long.
Right. Yeah.
So that was
Awesome.
about all I had from Pollock, but I altogether from all the coaches, excuse me, very encouraged about the direction everything is heading. I do believe, as Coach Prime said, they're not done. I think the spring portal is going to be pretty big for them,
Yeah.
especially now that the contract is ironed out. Presumably, they'll have a little bit more clarity on what their budgets might be. And they'll also have some other recruiting pools in that he does have the extension. You have Marshall Falk on staff now. You've since brought in Byron Leftwich, one guy we haven't talked to yet, clearly. So hopefully, maybe we get him. But you said that's a bit of a stranger situation too.
Yeah. I don't think he's fully here yet. So
Okay.
he hasn't technically been hired yet. So, um,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
they kind of just flying by the seat of their pants. You know what I
From
mean?
what I've been
Everybody
told,
else will catch up.
I don't think he's like fully. I know he was here. People saw him on the video. I don't think he's fully here this spring. I think it's gonna be more of a summer thing.
Okay.
I could be
Okay.
wrong, but that's what I was told. That
So we'll wait to hear an official announcement on that. And then the last thing I'll note is multiple different coaches highlighted how big of an addition Swayze was as strength and conditioning coach. And I look
yeah.
forward to getting to talk to him as well. Because keeping Coach Mo on staff,
Good luck.
well, maybe not. Did we ever talk to Coach Mo? We did. During spring ball, didn't we talk to? I've definitely asked Coach Mo a question during spring ball before. No, 100%
Nope.
never.
Never.
Okay. I could have sworn.
I
Well,
met him when he. I met him when
I
he was.
met the guy.
I
Yeah,
met him
maybe
when he
that
was
was
at
why.
Jackson State, and I've
Yeah.
said hi to him and everything. But we've never talked to him.
It would be cool.
Yeah.
Just another idea.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was the coaches. Those were my takeaways. I'm looking forward to this next section of spring ball here. But did you want to talk about the artificial surface real
Yeah.
quick?
Sorry, just real quick. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
it came out last week that the Buffs are gonna. They've been toying with the idea. They're going back to artificial turf for the first time since '98. It's gonna be a much better surface than it was back in '98. Look, the Buffs' best years in their history were with that artificial turf, that basically green concrete that they had at Folsom Field. It's much better turf now. Um, I'll say this: when I first put that news out there last week, overwhelming the comments on social media where I hate this. Here come the ACL injuries, all this stuff, right? And I just had to say, well, wait a minute. You realize that they practice on this stuff every day in the IPF. And most of these
Yeah.
guys, when they go and train somewhere else, they practice on it at a high school field or wherever. Coach Prime just installed this stuff at his house for his sons to play on. And, nobody's ever, I mean, if there was going to all of a sudden rack up ACL injuries, why have they not happened? And all these years with the IPF. Now I know there's been ACL injuries, there's been injuries, but
I'm
that's
knocking
football.
on everything. Yeah.
I know, but I mean that's football, right?
Yeah.
And so
Uh-huh.
I would just bite back at that argument that here come all the injuries now. It's like, look, it could happen Tuesday in practice or Wednesday in practice or Thursday in practice. Like, and Coach Prime uses the IPF more than any other coach before him, because I think most of the previous coaches went outside on the grass a lot, and so, yeah, yes, there's going to be injuries, but I mean, it's football, and so I actually like it. I prefer grass. I will say that, but I understand why CU is doing it. And look, when the next day the contract news comes out, like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. You have that artificial turf. You can have more concerts at Folsom Field, which brings in revenue, which helps you pay for this football coach that you got to pay for.
And a new roster you got to pay for, and 20 million you got to come up with for the rev share. So
Yep.
it's yeah, they need more revenue streams. I
Yeah.
think that's very clear. At Folsom Field, for those of you who don't know, sometimes we have to take ourselves out of that. They hold, what would you say? I don't know, like 5 concerts a year there prior,
Well,
maybe
not
2,
even
maybe
that.
not even that, maybe like 3. because
Yeah, and
it's
it's
typically
only been recently, it
that
was
they
just a few
started it
years
up.
ago. I mean,
Yeah.
like right before COVID, they started doing the Dead and Company,
Yeah.
and then they've started adding a few more. But you can really only do concerts right now, in June and
In the
July,
summer. Yeah, in the summer.
June and
And
early July.
and the field typically gets absolutely trashed when
Right.
you do the concerts because it's
Yeah.
natural grass.
Yep.
I did hear somebody the other day was like, well, it makes sense because Folsom never looks great in November. I don't agree. Like it can be patchy sometimes, but I actually remember walking out there after the Oklahoma State game. It looked pretty good. So shout
Yeah.
out to the grounds crew.
Oh, the
Those guys
grounds crew
always
does a great
bust their
job. Yeah.
ass. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I feel like in this whole discussion of being like, oh, they'll be fine with turf, we have totally skirted over the fact that they have a grounds crew that grows grass in one of the most northern, northwest stadiums in the country. Like that's a big deal that
Yeah.
they can get it to that they can get it in the shape that they get it into. And it's always I have never once, maybe I don't know, maybe not. Maybe later McIntyre years or a year where we got a really early winter where like in November we got early snow because that used to happen a little while ago. It doesn't happen as much anymore where we would
Yeah.
get those early ones. Maybe then the field would look like it was needing a little love. But I would say I can't remember a time where I ever go, oh, Folsom looks awful. I thought
Yeah.
they always did a really nice job with the field. So shout out to those guys, man,
Yeah.
because
I've
I
never
feel
thought it
like
looked awful.
they've been lost in the fold here the last week because that's not easy to do. I really do.
No.
I mean, I think they've been lost in the fold, and that's tough work,
Yeah.
especially after that dickhead drove the truck on it last year. Excuse me. I mean,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like those
Yeah.
guys have done it. You couldn't even tell. Like they did a really nice job. So
Yeah.
anyway, yeah,
I
look,
think it's gonna look weird, having
for
that in
sure.
there because
Yeah.
we're so used to the grass. But I think it won't take long to get used to it, and I think that it's gonna look nice. You can have the black end zones, from what I've been told, which I think I like that. I think a lot of people like that black end zone with the gold buffaloes in it, and so yeah. And look, don't be surprised if things like September 13th, week 3 when the Buffs are in Houston, there's a concert at Folsom Field. You can do that now. You
Which would be
know,
great. I love
so
that. We
you
need more
can
big acts in Boulder.
do a concert in May now.
Yeah.
You can do those things. So yeah, it makes sense why they're doing it. It's just gonna be kind of weird to see it, and it'll get some getting used to, but I like it overall.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact that it was natural, the natural vibe. I think that was what people were really upset about. It was
Yeah,
aesthetically pleasing with the grass. It feeds into the whole we're Boulder, with the earth. We're built right into the side of the mountains. It's nature. I hate losing that part of it. I'll just be real with you. But there are many other business factors that outweigh it now, which is
yeah.
clearly the motivation here. And if you want Colorado to compete, then just close your eyes and
Well,
swallow the pill.
yeah, and it's interesting when I looked at every team in the country and who has what. Most of the country is on turf anyway,
Yeah.
but the higher percentage are the non-power four schools, the ones that don't have the money. They've gone to turf as a money saving
Yeah.
turf,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's what
guess
the
where
Buffs need to
CU
do.
is? Yeah.
They
I
they
mean,
they're more in as far as that goes. This is a whole
yeah.
because this could
This
open
is
up a
a
whole other
ton.
can of
Yes. Yes.
worms.
Yes.
But they're in a money. They need to save some money because they
Yeah.
got some things to pay for, including the head coach and some players, all that stuff. So yeah, it is interesting. But like most of the schools, 31 of the 41 that played on grass last year were either in the South or Arizona or California. And so most of the country has gone to
Arizona.
on grass. Arizona State. I said in the state of
Arizona
Arizona.
State plays on grass?
Yeah.
That's dumb.
Yeah.
That's dumb. I mean, Arizona plays on turf. UA has turf.
Right.
Arizona State should not have grass with how hot it gets
Well, they
down
do.
there in
But
Tempe.
so
Anyway, yeah, yeah, yeah.
ASU, a couple of schools in California, and then a bunch in the
Sucking up
South.
water.
That's who has the turf or the grass. So yeah, it makes sense.
Here's what I will say. CU is at a stage where they're going through a little bit of imposter syndrome with the company they're trying to keep,
Right.
right? Like, hey, do I really belong here? Not really. Like, you're
Right.
going home to the smaller house in the worst car,
Right.
compared to leaving the banquet where that guy's going home in a nice car to a mansion. It's like, okay, we're building there. We're getting there, but CU had just been left in the dust for a long time without real stewards of the program
Yeah.
who understood where to take it and how to get it there and had the cachet to do it. And so now they are. So they have to make some adjustments along the way to make sure that they can keep up. And at the end of the day, the one cool part is that they can practice in Folsom more now, which I
Yeah.
think is a big deal. So as far as like the actual football of it all goes, that's
Yeah.
important because they used to really leave it alone during the year so they
Yeah.
could save it for game days.
You don't
And
want to
now,
practice on it. Yeah.
well, and now you can get those kids more used to being in there and making plays in there. You probably be in there. I'd be in there a little bit more than I was last year if I were them this upcoming
They're
season.
still going to limit it from what I'm told because they still, the less you're on it, the longer the life is. And they, is this a cost cutting
All
thing?
right,
Then
let's not
so
cut off our nose to spite our face now.
I'm,
Okay, there's a difference in saving
I,
money and being dumb
I
about it.
understand that. I'm saying
Yeah, yeah.
don't expect there to all of a sudden be, I mean, what I was told is there's a lot of these venues that like they just throw every event possible in there, and that's not going to happen at CU.
No,
Now you're
no,
going to
no.
practice on there a little bit more, yes. So
Yeah,
one other
that's all
thing,
I meant.
Matt, yeah, one other thing real quick. I just want to get your thought on the NCAA oversight committee rejected the waivers. It's kind of what we thought. To me, I mean, there's a lot of people out there like this makes no sense. Of they're only doing this because it's Coach Prime or whatever. Like to me, the reasons make sense. We said all along that like I bet this doesn't happen because it seems like it'd be sort of an unfair advantage to two teams because all these other teams don't have a chance to do this. You're making the rule. It'd really be giving a waiver to two teams,
Yep.
whereas everybody else didn't really have that chance.
It's
And
about
so
fairness and
it's about
equality.
fairness and equality and all that stuff. And so
Yeah.
I totally get it. I'm not surprised at all at their ruling. And they did mention in their statement their ruling that they're going to look at it for a later date. So I bet what happens is they're going to review it and they're going to allow it in 2026 going forward. But that this year they're kind of like, this is too quick. We're not going to
Yeah,
do it now. We'll do it later.
100%. Yeah, it's basically what we said. We knew this wasn't coming. It would have been nice. I didn't understand why CU was so positive about it. Maybe they were just trying to push that. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think that's kind of tantamount to wishful thinking, you know. But at the same time, I love that they started the conversation and they forced the NCAA and the Football Oversight Committee to have to address it by
Yeah.
petitioning them and by doing it this way. So I appreciated that because they definitely did kickstart all of that. Now, unfortunately, you're going to see, you know, people like Mike Gundy come in and pretend like they came up with the idea all on their own and swoop in to take credit away from Deion Sanders, which
Yeah. I don't know
sucks.
about that. I mean, I think this
Did you
got,
hear him? Did you hear him?
no, but this got,
He's like,
this,
oh, I thought of that idea years ago with us in Oklahoma, which, by the way, dumbass, why would you ever want to do that against your in state rival? That would turn
yeah,
into a giant
look,
fight.
everybody knows Coach Prime came with the idea.
I just think
I
he
think the
should
best part
be
about it was that
given the credit for it.
you had to do it now because it means more, it got more attention happening during spring ball than if you bring up the idea at media day in the summer. And so I think credit Coach Prime. He got the ball rolling. I bet it happens in 2026.
I hope so. I hope
Yeah,
so.
awesome, Matt. Well, we got plenty more to talk about through spring ball, and we got spring practices this week and a pro day coming up. And so we'll come back next week. We'll talk about a couple more practices and a pro day, which is gonna be a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it will be. I'm excited. I mean, Circus is coming to town. Circus is
Right.
coming to town. NFL Network, which congratulations to them for landing NFL Network for that. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a big
Yeah.
deal. It's just another showcase. It's just another example of they've been on the leading edge of this, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I'm looking
It'll be
forward to seeing all the scouts and their narratives flip on Shador, which is going to happen.
right.
Just wait. Shador impresses its pro day.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Scouts, could Shador go instead of Cam Ward at one? You're going to see
Right.
all this afterwards. He hasn't thrown in front of these guys. The second he throws in front of these guys, everybody's going to eat a lot of crow. It's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Well, looking forward to seeing it happen. It'll be a fun week. And Matt, I'll see you out in Boulder this week.
See you, buddy.